Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon as we have the pleasure of hosting the Partnership for Public Service. Earlier this morning, they presented a great presentation about the federal job search and hosted some small talks just before we start with this workshop here with regards to the federal resume. I'm Jermel. I'm an advisor within the Office of Career Strategy. I work specifically with the Common Good and Creative Careers team, the CGCC, and we're here to support you as you pursue careers that make a difference and utilize your creativity. This includes areas such as media communications, nonprofits, education, and of course, government. Without further ado, let me pass it along to Ann Straith and Logan Cole from the partnership.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come learn more about the federal resume process. My name is Logan Cole. I manage programs at the Partnership for Public Service. In my role, I have the opportunity to work with folks all across higher education, students and faculty, but really the main goal is to equip folks to be able to help the next generation of public servants launch into successful careers where they can create change, implement policy, do meaningful work. So if you're interested in leading and working in a career where you can make a difference, the federal government's a great option to consider. But to do that, there are some different tips and tricks to be aware of in order to accept that job and navigate the hiring process. So we'll spend most of our time this afternoon talking about the federal resume process. But before we jump in, how many of you have a federal resume or have heard of a federal resume? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, so there's some familiarity. And we'll work through this information, but if at any point you have questions, feel free to shout them out, and we'll also have some time at the end where we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. There's a lot of information, so we'll also make sure you get the slide deck and any resources referenced too. But here's our agenda. So we'll talk more about who we are as the Partnership for Public Service and the federal government at a glance. This is just helpful so you know a little bit more about who we are and why we're here this afternoon. And then we'll spend most of our time talking about the federal resume process. We'll discuss federal resumes versus industry resumes, how to use the USA Jobs Resume Builder, the different components of that federal resume, and then of course how to tailor those bullet points to make sure they're matching what the federal government is looking for, because that'll make a world of difference when applying to any federal agency. And then last but not least, we'll round out with some resources, so that way following this presentation today, if you ever want to reference this material or take your next steps towards a federal job, you'll have the tools to do so. There's a sign-in sheet here. I know there's a sign-in code here. I know there was some paper going around, but either way, as long as we get your information, we'll make sure you get all these resources today. But a little bit more about the partnership. So we're a nonpartisan nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. Our whole mission is to build a better government and a stronger democracy. And as an organization, we look to do that in a number of ways. But on Ann and I's team, the federal workforce team, we work on a variety of workforce issues. And what drives a lot of our work here today is that less than 7% of the federal government is under the age of 30. And so that indicates a strong need for young talent, for talent with all sorts of different backgrounds and skill sets to be able to come into government and carry out the important work government does, but to also create change and make things better in this country. And so that's what guides a lot of our team's work and why we're here this afternoon. And so as we go through this is a workshop primarily to think about your federal resume, but think about what motivates you. What's your call to service? Are there causes that you care about? Is there policy that you care about? Are there communities that you want to impact in your career? Think about that, because I think that'll be important things to guide you as we jump into the federal resume process. And truthfully, the federal hiring process and building out that resume can be daunting, but I think sometimes thinking about those things that excite you and motivate you can be great to remember as you're putting in all the hard work in the application process. And so here's just the federal government at a glance. You can get a sense that federal jobs are everywhere. So whether you want to stay in Connecticut, go to Washington, D.C., or really anywhere across the U.S., there are federal jobs. And so that federal resume is important whether you want to work in DC or in California, Texas, or anywhere in between. So just keep that in mind, that federal jobs are everywhere. And just a quick snapshot, in Connecticut, we love to highlight this. There's about 8,000 jobs, primarily in the defense space here in the state of Connecticut, but there are also jobs located or across many agencies here within the state, but also many across the region. But now, most importantly, let's jump in to talk about federal resumes. So I know a few of you said you have a federal resume or are familiar with it. The biggest difference between a federal resume and maybe the standard industry resume you already have is that federal resumes are going to be longer. They're longer because the federal government likes to have a lot of detailed information about you, as the resume is the application when applying to a federal job. So typically, a federal resume is going to be anywhere between 2 to 5 pages. And you might be wondering, do I even have enough experience to get up to 5 pages? And the answer is you probably do. If you're earlier in your career, your resume will likely be closer to 2 pages, but as you continue to grow and gain experience, it might extend up to 5 pages. And that's because the federal government wants to know not only what you did, but how you did it. And then on top of that, your involvement on campus or leadership positions in student orgs and in the community count as valuable work experience. So you'll want to spend time not only thinking about internships and part-time jobs, but also those other other things you're involved in, and what professional skills you've gained from that, because those are important elements on your federal resume. And as we go through this conversation, building your federal resume can seem difficult and can seem tough, but there's a lot of things available to help you and to make it easier. And one of those tools is the USA Jobs Resume Builder, where you can build and save resumes on the site. So that way it'll save you time when applying, and then it'll format it for you. And any time that you can save time in the federal hiring process, that's a good thing. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how to think about each component of the resume process. And again, if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to shout them out or raise your hand. We're ultimately here to support you all. And so here's the big difference between industry and federal resumes. We'll dive in deeper. With a standard resume, you'll typically see font sizes between 10 to 12, Times New Roman. Again, a standard font that's easy for a hiring manager to read. In the federal government, a real person reviews every single resume, so you don't just send it off and apply and it goes through some sort of computer system. A real hiring manager will read your resume. So it's important that it's clear, that it's concise, and that, quite frankly, it's readable to someone manually reviewing the resume. We recommend, with that industry resume, that you're going to want to fit that onto one page. And then as you grow in your career, you can expect industry resumes to be somewhere between 1 to 2 pages for master's students and 2 to 3 pages maximum for PhDs and postdocs. And a lot of this can be found through the Office of Career Strategy here on campus, of resources there. And of course, you'll want to be mindful of using black and white font, checking for spelling and grammar. Much of this you probably already know, as you have a resume here on campus detailing some of your involvements at internships and part-time jobs. And again, think about using reverse chronological order when appropriate when building your resume. And so those are some standard resume tips that are going to be helpful no matter if you're doing your industry resume or your federal resume. But here we'll look more into the USA Jobs Resume Builder process. And so this is just a short video to show you what it looks like. And so here, like I said, you can save resumes, and you can save job searches and jobs on the USA Jobs platform. And you can save up to 5 unique resumes. This is great because if you have different career interests or you're interested in different agencies, you can make resumes for each one. And so you'll select Build Resume, and you can name it however you'd like. And once you do that, you can begin adding your work experience. And so there's a lot of different fields here, and we recommend using the Resume Builder because it formats everything, and it ensures that no critical information is missing from your federal resume. If you're missing information, then your resume may not be reviewed. So using the Resume Builder is a great way to ensure that you have all the information you need when applying to a job. And here you can edit, you can save up to those 5 different resumes, and you can even make your resume searchable. This is helpful when you begin applying to federal positions to make it searchable, as federal hiring managers might begin searching resumes when you begin applying for jobs. But we'll jump in, and I've already mentioned this a bit, but who really reviews your federal resume? The answer is a real person, so it doesn't go through a tracking system, it doesn't go through software, but instead you'll apply on USA Jobs. So you'll log into your profile, you'll find those jobs that you're interested in, and build that federal resume, and once you submit it, it then goes to a human resources official for an application review. These are folks that work within the agency, and they'll evaluate your resume to ensure you meet the job requirements and that your resume really matches the job description. So as you think about your federal resume, it's important to keep in mind that you tailor your resume to the best of your ability to that job announcement. So when on USA Jobs, be sure to see what are those key responsibilities, what skills are they looking for, and then highlight that in your federal resume so when it goes to that HR official, they can see, okay, as a candidate, you have those key skills, here's what you've done, here are your, here's what leadership skills you have, they're looking for someone with policy skills or analysis skills, you've demonstrated that here and here. By being clear on your federal resume, it makes it clear to the hiring manager what skills you have and whether or not you're suitable for the position. Once you, after resumes are reviewed, if selected, you then go to a selecting official to review. So this means you've made it past that initial vetting stage, and then someone will, again, review those resumes and then determine who should be interviewed. And then you'll go through the interview process, which will then, and then pending a successful interview, a job offer. So when thinking about your federal resume, it's important to make sure it's easy to understand, it's clear, because real folks are reviewing that resume, and being able to explain different elements of your experiences is important. One thing I like to emphasize as well is that a human resources official will review your application, but it's not safe to assume they might be that they're an expert in your field. So for example, maybe you're really passionate about science and technology, and that you use a lot of technical skills and information in your resume. That's terrific, but think about using plain language to the best of your ability, or breaking down some of those complex concepts that you know, because an expert in the field like you would know what that means, but sometimes an HR official may not be an expert in that field, but they are an expert in determining whether or not you are a good fit for the job. So what I'd recommend is, thinking about the language you're using and making sure that not only you understand it, but maybe someone who's not in your field of study could understand it as well. And so here are some top tips for the federal resume. I mentioned it already once before, but tailor your resume. Use the job announcement on USA Jobs to take what's there, those key job descriptions and duties, and tailor it to the best of your ability. Again, just like an industry resume, numbers impress hiring managers, so anytime you can use numbers, market skills and achievements, that's really going to help your resume stand out. And I had mentioned this before, but use common language and make sure that anyone reading your resume can understand what skills you have. And as a reminder, the resume is your application, so typically with federal jobs there aren't cover letters or essay questions, so what you put on your resume is what that selecting official as well as hiring manager, that's what they're basing their decision on. So think about that when, expand upon some of those experiences you've had. Think about what you did, how you did it, the things that you've learned from those experiences. It's okay to use either a bullet point format on your federal resume, or even expanding to more of a paragraph block style. We hear from hiring managers across government that either format works well, but their point of emphasis is just making sure that you're thorough and detailed to ensure that all of your skills and experiences are represented well on your resume. And so there are a lot of different resume components and some differences between federal resumes and industry resumes. So I'll turn it over to Ann just to dive a bit deeper into this. And again, as we walk through this, any questions, feel free to ask. Because at this point, we start to diverge a little bit deeper into the nuances of the federal resume, and I just think it's important that for anyone here to know sort of the foundational steps to begin building that. So I'll turn it over to Ann.
All right, thank you. So as Logan said, my name is Ann Straith. I'm an associate at the Partnership for Public Service on the Federal Workforce Team, And so I'd like to go over some resume components, how they differ from your standard industry resume. So since all of you are here today, I'm guessing that all of you are go-getters, you're looking for that next opportunity, so I'm sure you are already using all of the resources available to you at Yale from the Office of Career Strategy. So you might recognize these industry resume subject headings, categories. So you've got your heading, your education, work experience, leadership, publications, skills, licenses, certifications. All of these are probably categories that you may have in your resume in some capacity or another. What we want to do is take these categories and translate them into a way that's going to be functional for your federal resume. So if you're using that federal resume builder, these are going to be the sections that are going to be outlined. And so we'll walk through each of those, but one thing I really want to emphasize is that your work experience section is going to include most of your experience, including work experience, volunteering, leadership, any community involvement. So some of these headings you're seeing in your industry resume that you might separate out, you're going to include in your work experience because that's going to give you the most opportunity to expand on those skills and explain how it's relevant to the jobs you're applying for. But you'll also include information like your education, your standard candidate information, your name, your contact information, your email, all of that. But you can also have specific spaces to include information about any language skills you have, certifications, trainings, professional publications, references. So these additional components you'll be able to include in your federal resume, but they do offer you a smaller amount of space in which to do so. So if there's anything within there that you really want to expand on, you can put that in what they refer to as the work experience section to really expand on that and write those bullet points out, those paragraphs out to really connect it to your experience. So we'll get into this section. As I said, it's going to require a couple pieces of information for you. Most of this is going to be required. What you'll notice is optional is the level of pay. That's something you can include if you want. You don't necessarily have to. But when it comes to information about your work experience, again, it doesn't need to be paid professional experience. Again, share those volunteering experiences, club involvement, any other leadership positions that you may have that you want to expand on. This is the place you want to do that. And again, they frame the layout here as though it were an employer, but you can attach any organizations that it's related to. If you're in a club here at Yale, you might list the name of the club and then your title if you're a treasurer, if you're some sort of leadership position. So people tend to be a little confused because this is labeled the work experience section, which is true. This is where you want to put all of that experience, but this is also going to be where you're sharing the bulk of your experience because it allows you the most amount of space to detail that. Now, projects and coursework you can include on your education section, but in terms of your leadership, any of those transferable skills that you really want to highlight, you'll want to include within the work section. So, one thing I want to highlight, oh, yeah, question?
Just a quick question. Would we put our club involvement in the work section as well?
Yeah, so you would put club involvement within work experience. If you are involved in a club but you don't necessarily want to write bullet points about it, you want to list that you're involved but you're not going to go into detail, you can include that under education. You can also include that in associated organizations later on in the resume. But if you really want to build on that and you have transferable skills that you want to highlight, you can put it under the work experience section. So I want to see what you guys think about tailoring our bullet points. So if a job posting for a GS5 role is telling you that you need to produce a wide range of documents using office automation software, you need to receive phone calls, providing information, routine procedural matters, and then you enter, delete, modify, retrieve data from databases. Using these bullet points here, shout it out, let me know, what do you think you would do to update these and to tailor them to this role? Anybody has any ideas? Give you guys a minute. Does anybody see anything that they would improve on these bullet points? What do we notice about them? Yeah.
I would add like quantifiers and also what database software you use.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. So what you notice in these, we're lacking any sort of metrics, right? So this person is reporting weekly sales data to the merchandising team, but they're not telling us, what kind of data, how much, how often are they doing these things. So numbers are a really great way to emphasize your experience when it comes to listing things on your resume. So that's a really good point. Do we have anything else? What else do we notice about these bullet points?
For me, just in general, I'm kind of building off that, note about specificity. I just feel like these bullet points aren't necessarily tailored toward this specific job posting. So I feel like even like incorporating some of this language into those bullet points and just making sure that it like accurately answers each of those bullet points and ensures that you have the skills for this specific job posting would be ideal
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. So each of these bullet points we have here could be edited and changed in some way to borrow that language to be reflective. I know Logan may have said it earlier, we like to give the advice if the job posting is asking for a black sweater, don't say you're wearing a charcoal cardigan. Give them the language that they're looking for. It's going to be the most direct way to show that experience, connect those bullet points exactly. Obviously you don't want to be copying and pasting the job descriptions because like they're going to notice that, but make sure you're, again, borrowing language, making it as closely related as possible. Do we have anything else?
This is like a very general question, but when you're like writing the descriptors for your work experience, do you want to include punctuation at the end, like you want the periods at the end?
So it really depends. In terms of formatting, you just want to be consistent. So hiring managers, in our experience, don't necessarily have a preference. Obviously, if you're doing paragraph style, you want to use standard punctuation, but if you're doing bullet points, as long as you're being consistent, hiring managers are okay with it either way. Yeah. All right. So in terms of the education section, so this is going to be where you want to list your degree, if you're undergrad, graduate, if you have an associate's degree before you came here. Include all of that information, any majors that you're doing, minors, if you're doing a double major, list that too. You can also include any relevant coursework that's going to be related to the opportunity that you're applying for. If you've done any projects, if you've developed any skills through those projects, this is a really great place. They give you space for that. Again, include any information that you think is going to be relevant to the job. GPA is optional, but one thing I want to stress is that if you're applying for a role, you're coming up on graduation, you're applying for those entry-level roles. If you're in undergrad, your internships are going to be at about GS4 level, and GS is the pay scale. About 70% of federal roles fall within the GS scale. So if you graduate from an undergrad program, 4 years of school, you'll be at about a GS5. If you have additional experience or you have a higher GPA, you can go into a GS7, which is going to increase your rate of pay. So if that's something that you're comfortable listing in your resume, you certainly can. But if you don't list it, get to the end of that process, you get that job offer, and they come back to you and say, hey, we want you as a GS5, you can't negotiate to get a GS7 even if you do have the grades for that, because you didn't list it in your resume originally. So just be aware that the resume that you submit in your application is going to be the document that they go back to throughout this meritocratic process. Additionally, with education, if you've studied abroad at all, if you have any additional degrees, you can include multiple within your education section. Again, so references and additional information. One thing you'll notice in your work experience section is you can give them the opportunity to connect with your past supervisors, your past employers. They can reach out to them if you select yes to that. You can also tell them to contact you first in case you want to get in touch with that person. If you have any additional references that you'd like to list on your resume, they provide you the space to do so, whether that's professors, professional acquaintances, people that you've worked with in the past, colleagues. You can include any references that you may want to add here. Great. So again, as I told, oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a quick question. If we say just like no, does that look bad? Like we don't want you like to contact that person just because maybe like I haven't talked to them in a while or something like that, or they might not answer. Does that look bad or?
Oh, sorry, one more time.
Like just if we select no for can we contact that person, does that look bad?
So not necessarily. There could be a lot of reasons why you might select no, and that's not necessarily something that the hiring manager is going to be concerned about. But Logan, if you have any.
Yeah, there's no penalty for that. And again, like maybe somebody moved on, or maybe they don't work with that organization anymore, or you just don't feel comfortable with that. When it comes to references and verifying your employment, once you are selected for a position and going through some of the background check process, there's also part of the process that's reserved for that as well. And they may ask for additional references. So there's no penalty there. It's an option, but if you don't feel comfortable with that, don't feel like you have to say yes. And because it'll increase your chances for a job. It's more of a formality thing on that end. And then when they do need references, they'll also ask for them again later on. But great question.
For related skills, what are some examples of skills that like government is looking for / we could list about our work experience?
Sorry, one more time.
For like the description part of the job experience, it says like duties, accomplishments, and related skills. I was just wondering what are some examples of related skills that we could list?
Yeah, so anything that you can tie to the job posting in those duties and descriptions within the job posting, if you have skills that are related to that, I'm trying to think of an example, but any project management skills that you have, anything that would be relevant to that job that you've developed through school or through work, if you can highlight those skills, again, using those action verbs at the beginning of your bullet points, describing what you've done and how you've done it, to connect it to what you're currently doing. So when it comes to skills, like hard skills, you can list those individually, like if you know any softwares, if you know any languages, but any of those softer skills, communications, people skills, you'd want to put within the context of the work that you've done. And then as this additional information, this is going to be the last page that you see in that federal resume folder. So if you have any licenses or certifications, if you've done any professional publications, you'd want to list all of those here. There is also space to add any additional information that maybe there wasn't opportunities to add in earlier. So you have an opportunity to really include everything, because as Logan said, the federal government really does want to know everything. It's going to be giving you the best chance that you have to get that opportunity, to get that role, if you share everything with them. The more experience you share with them that you have, the better chance that you have. You don't want to worry about holding anything back or thinking maybe like this skill isn't relevant or maybe this experience isn't relevant to what I'm applying for, because you can always tie in transferable skills to that role. All right, so I touched on this a little bit already, but if you make it all the way through that process, you get your job offer, your resume does still matter. As I mentioned earlier, it's a meritocratic process. So they're going to take your resume from the beginning of that process and use that when it comes to calculating your experience, calculating your pay scale. So it's really important to focus on your resume now, because you can't change it later on. You can change it until the end of that application deadline, but if you get that job offer, like I said, if they come back and tell you that they want you to come in as a GS5, but you think you have the GPA that would get you a GS7, you got to put that in your resume originally, because you can't negotiate on that point later on if you don't already include it. All right. So touching on this point again, this is a little bit more information on that. Again, if you have a GS7, you can have a 1-year specialized experience or additional academic achievement, that can land you that GS7. But GS scale can really be impacted by what you put on your resume. So again, I feel like I'm drilling this point into your heads over and over, but it is really important to be thorough and to include everything that you possibly want to include on your resume when you submit. All right, and so we're going to be transferring into some resources for you guys now. I know you may be familiar with USA Jobs, you've got your resume down, you're getting ready to apply to things. So now that you have your federal resume, you know what's going to be on it. We want to share with you guys how you can find those federal opportunities. So if you're applying on USA Jobs, that's a great place to start, but not all applications are going to be available on USA Jobs all the time. I mean, you log on every day, there are going to be new things getting posted, old applications that are closing, but how do you know what opportunities are out there, kind of in aggregate, what's available across the federal government? So the Federal Internship Finder is our tool that we have developed to kind of help answer that question. So we have gone across federal agencies and found evergreen information sources and co-located them all in one place. So regardless of whether or not they're actively searching for applicants, you can plan ahead and find these opportunities. So maybe if you're thinking, okay, next year I'm going to be applying for summer internships, what's out there that I might be interested in? This is going to be a go-to resource for that. You can filter by your career field. You can filter by if you want paid or unpaid opportunities, full-time, part-time. You can also filter by agency. So if you know the agency you're interested in working for, you can filter by that as well. And you can click to learn more. It will take you directly to the agency's website where you're going to find that up-to-date information for that specific opportunity, where you can learn information about how to apply, what the deadlines are, what information you're going to need to share. So all of that and more is on our gogovernment.org. But we're going to be transitioning into some more resources for you guys. I'm going to pass it over to Logan to talk about GoGovernment.
So if I were in your shoes, I'd probably forget everything that we just talked about and be like, well, what do I even do now? And like it's months from now and you want to figure out, all right, how do I develop my federal resume? I remember a little bit, where should I go? GoGovernment.org can be a great spot to do that. And so there's lots of resources there, but specifically, I'd like to highlight the federal resume section of the GoGovernment.org website. There you can find a lot of the information we talked about today, how to set up the foundational components of your federal resume, and how to then navigate over to USA Jobs and set up your profile and use tools like the Resume Builder and begin drafting your experience and bullet points for your federal resume. So I'll just continue on here to highlight a couple of the different options available. So when it comes to your federal resume, you can use career guides to support that. So these career guides can do a number of things. They can help you explore the different careers available in government. But when you click into a career guide, you can also find examples of common language and job posting, some of the language the federal government uses to describe certain types of responsibilities. And you can use this to then cross-check your resume to make sure it's matching what language the federal government uses, because the federal language is a little bit different than how you might talk about your experience with your friends or even with folks in different industries. So using these career guides can be helpful in doing that. Let me go back to the career guides page one more time. So with these career guides too, each federal job is going to look a little bit different and it's going to require different skills. There was a question talking about how to include relatable skills. I recommend using the career guides and that make the most sense given your major, area of study, or career field you wish to pursue, because there you can find some of those key skills, and those would be the ones you'd want to use to guide your resume development process. And you can find those through this tool here. But with the federal resume, I think the most important thing to consider is that it's going to be extremely detailed. So the more information you put into it, the better. And that is your application. So be sure to be as thorough as possible and tailor that resume to the best of your ability. And then just one last thing I want to highlight here before we jump into some questions, because I'd love to hear from you all and support you all, is our Future Leaders in Public Service internship program. We always love to plug this internship program, so if you are interested in pursuing an internship with a federal agency, applications for this program are open until November 24th. It's open to undergraduate and graduate students, so if you're interested in pursuing federal employment, this is one way to do it and to sample that. So I encourage you all, if you're interested in applying for summer 2024, to get those applications in by November 24th. And so this is another program we have too. It's the Cybersecurity Talent Initiative. So if you're into cybersecurity and you want to launch your career into government upon graduation, this is a great 2-year fellowship program to be able to do that. And applications for this cycle close November 8th, but are open annually. And so with that, I'll stop here for questions. I'd love to hear what questions you all have. How can we be helpful